Year 11s, we're going to be looking at the nitrogen cycle. So what we've got on the slide at the moment is obviously it's looking like a very complex diagram. We are going to simplify it. So what I want you to do now is just pay attention to what I'm going to draw on the screen, on the board rather, because that's going to be the level of detail that we need. The diagram does show us the overall picture though, so it's an important picture, but we're going to focus predominantly on what I draw on the screen. So just like the carbon cycle, we're starting with our atmospheric nitrogen. That's going to be critical because that's our source. That's our source of our nitrogen. Now, just like the carbon cycle, the first point of call is going to be getting that nitrogen into the living parts of our ecosystem, the living parts of our environment. But unlike carbon, it's not plants that do that for us, it's these microorganisms. So these nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which we find in the soil, are going to change the nitrogen gas into nitrate. And that nitrate is water soluble, which means that plants can now take it up. So now we enter into the plant tissues. So now the water enters plants. Obviously, once it's into plants now, then it becomes available to animals. And so the animals either eat the plants directly, or they'll eat animals that have already eaten plants. Now with carbon, we have to get the carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. And with nitrogen, we need to get the nitrogen back in the atmosphere. Nitrates, although they can be a gas, we can combine them with other things to make a gas, they're not going to make it there themselves. And in fact, we need to replenish our starting nitrogen gas. So once again, we have these bacteria that come into it. And this time our bacteria are called denitrifying bacteria. They're part of these decomposers, this group of organisms that we call decomposers. And so bacteria, fungi, they're able to do that. So these decomposers, they are able to convert the stored nitrogen as nitrates or proteins or nucleic acids, which is the reason that animals and plants need this nitrogen. However it's stored, these decomposers are able to release it. That's basically the end of the process. However, what we're most interested in is how are humans modifying this pathway? The main reason they're doing so is to increase the rate of growth of plants. So as we can see in this first step, or in this step here, the water-soluble nitrates are able to enter into plants. So what we do is we use fertilizers that are high in these water-soluble nitrates to actually increase the rate of growth of our plants. What this creates, though, is a significant problem, this problem of runoff, which is where a pollutant is able to enter into the water table or enter into a lake or a river through rainwater. Basically, the rain lands on the field, washes off any excess fertilizer, and that enters into a water body, whatever water body that might be. So this problem of runoff comes about with excess use of fertilizers. And more as we're finding out about these problems, we're actually discovering that what we need to do is carefully monitor our use of these fertilizers. And so more and more these researchers and farmers are working together to work out how to modify that. Because what ends up happening is if we get the balance wrong, we end up with this process called eutrophication, which is where one particular species, normally it's algae because they're very fast growing, takes over the water system, takes over the lake, takes over the river, removes the river of oxygen, of dissolved oxygen, so that nothing else can live. This creates massive problems for the ecosystems and loss of diversity, which can in some cases lead to extinction. So that's our nitrogen cycle. Again, the links between microorganisms. We've got our decomposers once again that are able to recycle the used nitrogen in our plants and in our animals back into the atmosphere so that it can happen all over again. So it's a really critical thing that you understand that. And then also, how are we modifying that? Using fertilizers. If you can come up with a more creative way, you can think about a use of nitrogen. More and more we're looking at problems with chemicals that we use, so nitric acid in the production of things like nylon, which is a significant problem for pollution. Maybe you can come up with something like that or do some research of your own.